Welcome, everyone, to a tremendous night. I'm Dr. Alan Kadish, president of Touro University. I'd like to welcome our students, faculty, staff, guests who came here tonight to honor the Honorable Justice Jackson as the 2025 Gould Book Award winner for her book, Lovely One. Justice Jackson has been first at many things in her life, but she's not the first Supreme Court justice to receive the Gould Book Award. She's actually the fourth. Sandra Day O'Connor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sonia Sotomayor have all preceded her as winners of the Gould Book Award. Tonight gives us the opportunity to celebrate this prestigious award together at the Touro Law Center. Since opening the Law Center, Bruce Gould's award, the Gould Book Award, has been one of the highlights of the year. And the main reason we're here tonight is Bruce. Thank you, Bruce. When the Law Center first opened, Dr. Lander, my predecessor and the only prior president of Touro University, dreamed of having students like Bruce here. He entered the Law Center in 1980, and he served as the second president of the Student Bar Association and graduated in 1984, receiving his Juris Doctoral degree. In 93, he also got a Master's of Legal Letters from New York University. Bruce, for many years, played a vital role in his family's company, Gould Publications, that began doing business in 1953 and specialized in law books and treatises for legal and law enforcement community. When it was sold in 2004, that business was one of the leading statutory law book publishers, thanks to Bruce's leadership. In 1990, Bruce established the Bruce K. Gould Book Award. Today, this tribute is the country's most prestigious award for the year's best book about legal topics and legal affairs. Bruce also, in 1994, endowed the first faculty chair, the Bruce K. Gould Distinguished Faculty Chair, currently held by Rena Slepowitz, who's here tonight. Thank you, Rena. In addition to his support for Touro, Bruce has been on multiple charitable boards and supported many important organizations. At Touro, Bruce's leadership and guidance and generosity has been exemplary. He was on the board of the Touro Law Center, as well as currently chairing the Touro University Board of Governors. I could go on for a long time talking about Bruce's contribution to society and to Touro, but you came here tonight to hear Justice Jackson. We're forever grateful. I want to also congratulate once again Justice Jackson on the winning of this prestigious award, and we're looking forward to hearing from her this evening. Bruce, please come up and help dedicate the award for tonight. Thank you.
I have to move the mic down now. Thank you, Dr. Kadish, for that warm introduction. I value your leadership, mentorship, and especially your friendship. Rabbi Krupka, Provost Salkin, Dean Langan, members of the Touro community, students, friends, and especially our distinguished award recipient, Associate Justice of the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 2025 presentation of the Bruce K. Gould Book Award. Little history. This award began more than 35 years ago when Dean Emeritus Howard Glickstein, who's sitting over there tonight, he's a young 96 years old. Can I say that? Howard and I met and explored the idea of creating a program that would reflect both my work in legal publishing and my lifelong love of books. What emerged was an award honoring the author of an outstanding publication that deepens our understanding of the law, the legal profession, and our legal system. Neither of us, I think, could have imagined how profoundly this award would shape the student body, enrich the legal community, and elevate the reputation of the Law Center. It has truly taken on a life of its own, becoming one of the leading legal literary awards in the nation. Over the years, our recipients have been insightful, engaging, remarkable, timely in their contributions. Among them, as Dr. Kadish said, Sandra Day O'Connor, Sonia Sotomayor, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, Senator Amy Klobuchar, New York Times columnist Bret Stephens, and author John Grisham, just to name a few. Tonight, we are deeply honored to welcome the Honorable Ketanji Brown Jackson as our award recipient for her memoir, Lovely One. In this powerful and candid work, Justice Jackson traces the journey from a family shaped by segregation to her history-making role as the first Black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. She reflects on her heritage, mentors, resilience, and the balance between ambition, identity, and family. Madam Justice, who will be with us just in a couple of seconds, we look forward to your remarks and the inspiration they will undoubtedly bring. Dean Langan, thank you as always for putting together such a remarkable evening. To Dean Hagan and your staff, flawless. This was a flawless evening, and I know it's going to conclude as being a flawless night. I wanted to add one personal note. As Dr. Kadish said, I am a proud graduate of Touro Law School. It has done so much for me in my life, and this is for the students. A lot of you sitting upstairs and downstairs, don't forget this institution when you become successful. Make sure you give back. It's the most important thing I think you can do in life. I want to thank you and enjoy the presentation.
Thank you, Bruce. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Elena Langan, and I have the privilege of being the dean here at Touro University Jacob D. Fuchsberg Law Center. Bruce, we really value your partnership. We are honored to host the Bruce K. Gould Book Award, and you have been a friend for years to the school and to me since I arrived. Before we begin the program, we have a few protocols that need to be followed, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. First of all, there are no cell phone use or photos throughout the event, except for a brief photo opportunity when we are presenting the award to Justice Jackson. I will announce when you're able to take photos, and following that, please ensure that you stow away your cell phones in your carry-on luggage. Please make sure to silence your phones throughout the event. Also, you must remain in your seat until we announce that the program has concluded, and at that time, you will be free to exit the auditorium. Okay, those are all the nasty rules we need to follow. Before we start talking about Justice Jackson, I do want to give a little bit of an update about Touro Law to those of you who may not know much about the law school or may have been away from the law school for a period of time. So those of you who do know Touro know that we are a very special place. Our graduates, which number almost 8,000, are practicing across 44 states and 12 countries. While they are here, they will receive a nationally recognized practical legal education that allows them to enter the profession practice ready. All of our graduates complete either a clinic or an externship, and each year the graduating class will have provided well over 25,000 hours of pro bono legal services to underserved members of our community. This focus on practical skills training has allowed the graduating class to achieve an employment rate that has exceeded 90% for the last 2 years, which is among the highest employment rates among New York law schools. This year, we enrolled our largest incoming class in recent history. They also had the highest incoming credentials ever in the history of the law school. And with a 50% increase in applications for this coming year, we are on track to welcome an equally impressive group to be part of our outstanding class next year. As we continue to enhance the student experience, we've launched 2 new concentrations, one on trial advocacy and the other in health law, bioethics, and policy. These join our existing concentrations in criminal law and land use and sustainable development law. We also established the Anti-Semitism Law Clinic under the direction of Rabbi Dr. Mark Goldfeder, the first in the country. This groundbreaking clinic addresses a timely need in our communities, providing our students with unique training in combating hate while serving those who are facing discrimination. Responding to rapid changes in the practice of law, Touro Law has embraced technology as both a teaching tool and a critical competency for tomorrow's attorneys. Our comprehensive approach to AI integration extends far beyond simple awareness through strategic institutional commitment, including a dedicated AI task force. Through the Gould Book Award, Touro Law reinforces its mission to celebrate intellectual achievement and promote works that advance justice and understanding of the legal system, enriching the education for future generations of lawyers who will be leaders in the legal field. Now, I would like to introduce to you Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson, this year's recipient of the Bruce K. Gould Book Award for her memoir, Lovely One. Justice Jackson was born in Washington, D.C., and raised in Miami, Florida. She earned her undergraduate and Juris Doctor degrees at Harvard University, where she was an editor of the Harvard Law Review. She served as a law clerk for Judge Patty B. Saris, Judge Bruce M. Celia, and Justice Stephen G. Breyer, establishing a strong foundation for her legal career. From 2010 to 2014, Justice Jackson served as vice chair and a commissioner on the U.S. Sentencing Commission. In 2012, President Barack Obama appointed her as a district judge for the United States District Court for the District of Columbia. President Joseph Biden then appointed her to the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit in 2021, and then nominated her as an Associate Justice of the Supreme Court in 2022. She became the first Black woman, the first former federal public defender, and the 6th woman to serve on the United States Supreme Court. At this time, I invite Dr. Alan Kadish, Provost Salkin, Bruce Gould, and Rabbi Krupka to join me on stage as we present the award to Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. I encourage everyone in the audience to take out your cell phones for the photo opportunity as I invite Justice Jackson to the stage to accept the Bruce K. Gould Book Award.
Good evening, everyone. I am delighted to be here with you this evening. Thank you all for joining me. And thank you for that wonderful award. Tremendous honor, and I'm very excited to have received it. I like to begin discussions of my book with a little bit of a reading from the preface, because I think it will give you information that will give you some background about me and get us warmed up. So the title of my book is Lovely One, and the preface begins entitled A Sacred Trust. I had to keep reminding myself this moment was real. It was just before noon on the 30th day of June 2022, and I was standing in front of a plain wooden door that would soon open into the grand West Conference Room of the Supreme Court of the United States. My family was already inside. My husband, Patrick, our daughters, Talia and Layla, and my parents, Johnny and Ellery Brown, were there among the family members and friends who had gathered to witness my historic swearing in. My heart was hammering so loudly that I wondered if the two black-robed men standing on either side of me, Chief Justice John G. Roberts Jr. and retiring Associate Justice Stephen G. Breyer, could hear it too. Only 2 hours before, they and the other 7 justices of the Supreme Court had issued their final decision of the 2021-22 term. Justice Breyer, a pragmatic consensus builder, was now stepping down from that august body. Having been privileged to serve as one of his law clerks more than 2 decades before, I would be stepping up in his place. I drew a deep breath to steady myself as the door in front of us swung wide and a court officer stepped aside to allow our passage into the room. Suddenly blinded by bright lights, I took a moment to understand that the source was a bank of video cameras set up to record the ceremony. As my eyes adjusted and I processed into the chamber behind the 2 justices, I felt heartened by the sight of my loved ones beaming at me from rows of chairs on the right side of the room. Chief Justice Roberts began by warmly welcoming those present. Then he turned toward me, now assuming a ceremonial air. "Are you prepared to take the oath?" he asked, his tone more formal than it had been a moment before. "I am," I responded, in a voice that sounded firmer than I felt. Patrick positioned himself between Chief Justice Roberts and me and held out a stack of 2 Bibles. "Please raise your right hand," the Chief Justice said, and I did so briskly, simultaneously resting my left palm on the pair of holy books. On top was our ancient Jackson family Bible, its brittle pages protected by the black leather binding that Patrick had had the foresight to get refurbished in 2013 when I'd been appointed to the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. I had sworn every oath since then on this cherished family Bible, just as I would now swear the constitutional oath to be administered by Chief Justice Roberts, followed by the judicial oath to be given to me by Associate Justice Breyer. Nominated by President Joe Biden 4 months earlier, I, the daughter of African-American parents who had come of age in the segregated South during the 1950s and early 1960s, would become the 116th justice and the first Black woman to sit on the Supreme Court in its 233-year history. These details made the other sacred volume on which I would swear my historic oath doubly significant. Tucked beneath our family's holy book was the Harlan Bible, donated to the court in 1906 by Associate Justice John Marshall Harlan. This tome had been used for the oath-taking by every Supreme Court appointee since then. Each justice had also signed one of the book's fly leaves after being sworn in. When the court curator brought that Bible to me in my temporary chambers later that afternoon so that I could add my own signature to the venerated roll, I thought about the justices of Harlan's era who collectively decided in the Plessy versus Ferguson opinion that state laws mandating the separation of people by race did not violate the 14th Amendment of the Constitution so long as the separate facilities were equal. Harlan had been the sole dissenter in the notorious 1896 case. And now here I was, affixing my signature to his Bible in black fountain pen ink. Only one generation after my mother and father had experienced the spirit-crushing effects of racial segregation in housing, schooling, and transportation while growing up in Florida, their daughter was standing on the threshold of history, the embodiment of our ancestors' dreams, ascending to a position that Justice Harlan and his colleagues likely never imagined possible for someone like me. But if Justice Harlan and his contemporaries could not have pictured this moment, my family and I, and indeed most of America, were fully cognizant of the significance of my nomination and confirmation to our nation's highest court. In subsequent conversations with people from across the country, I learned that I had been carried on 1,000,000 prayers lifted up on my behalf since the day of my nomination. I also fielded an avalanche of invitations to speak or appear in person, as excited well-wishers wanted to know my story in whatever form or fashion I might be willing to tell it. How was it, they wondered, that someone with such an unusual name and from such an unconventional background came to stand in such an unprecedented place, swearing an oath on 2 stacked Bibles that symbolized how far our nation has traveled. Mine has been an unlikely journey in many respects. And the book that you are honoring here tonight is about that journey. Thank you for being here and allowing me to talk to you about it.
Well, thank you for that. It's wonderful to hear you read the book in your own words, and as I learned earlier today, you actually have been nominated for a Grammy Award for your Audible version of the book.
Thank you. It's so exciting.
You are the first and only Supreme Court Justice so nominated.
To ever have been nominated for a Grammy Award. So this is very exciting.
So it must be a very daunting task to write a book while you're also on the Supreme Court. Why did you choose to do it at this particular time?
Well, I actually started working on this book right after I got confirmed. And if you'll recall the timing, I was actually confirmed in April, and I didn't start until the end of June because Justice Breyer had announced that he was going to step down at the end of the term. And so I had a little bit of time, and I was reflecting on what a journey it had been to go through that confirmation hearing. Some of you may have seen it. It was very arduous, and I was very grateful for having successfully navigated that process and thought, I really want to do something to pay tribute to the people and the circumstances that I felt were really most responsible for my success. And the book is really about my family, it's about my mentors, it's about all of the people who poured into me and prepared me for this opportunity and this moment.
You started being prepared for this moment very early on, and one of the things was your name.
Yes.
Lovely one.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and the origins?
Well, let me back up just a little bit because I think it's important that you get a sense of my family because that contributes to the story of my name. My grandparents had grown up in rural Georgia in the 1920s and 30s. And early in their time, they did not really have formal education. They were the descendants of slaves and sharecroppers and worked in their young age for a white family. My grandfather was a chauffeur for the family, and my grandmother worked in the kitchen. And they met, they married, and they moved to Miami, Florida, where they had heard that there were more opportunities for enterprising Negroes at the time. And my grandfather originally got a position driving for a beer company until he got fed up with the way in which people were treating him and talking to him. He left his job and started his own gardening business. He mowed other people's lawns, and he created a business that was successful enough to support his 5 children. My mother was one of those 5. He put all of his children through school, and my mother went to a historically black college and met my father in high school. He also went to a different historically black college. And my parents were very proud of our African American heritage. It was very important to them. They grew up in the 1950s and 60s in Miami during a time still of segregation, but very proud of who we were. And so when I was born in 1970, my mother asked my aunt, her sister, who was in the Peace Corps in Africa at the time, for a list of African names because she wanted to name her daughter an African name to impart to me the same kind of interest and investment in my heritage. And my aunt sent a list of names, and my mother chose Ketanji, which she was told meant lovely one.
It's a great story. Now, you were exposed to the law when you were very young.
I was.
At age 3?
At age 3. So I was born in Washington, D.C., and at the time my parents were public school teachers. And my father was a history teacher. My mother was a science teacher. My father taught at a public high school, and he was taking his kids to the Capitol Hill and the Supreme Court and all around as a part of his job, and he got very interested in the law. And he decided to go back to law school when I was 3 years old. He applied to various law schools. He got into the University of Miami, which is where both of my parents were from. And we moved back to Miami. And some of my earliest memories are of sitting in our kitchen on campus. We had an apartment on campus at the University of Miami. I'm sitting there. My father has his law books all stacked up, and I have my coloring books all stacked up, and we're working together. And so from that age, 3, 4, 5, I thought all you did was go to law school because that's what I saw. I grew up on the campus of a law school.
But it didn't take you long to decide you wanted to be a judge.
It did not.
At age 11?
At age 11. So in middle school, I was flipping through one of the various magazines that my parents permitted. There were a couple of different magazines that were actually black-owned publications, Ebony or Jet or Essence, one of these. And I saw a profile of a woman who was the first African-American female judge in the federal system in our country. She was appointed in the 1960s. Her name was Constance Baker Motley. And the thing that was most exciting to me as a middle schooler is that Constance Baker Motley had my birthday. We shared a birthday, and so I was just completely overtaken with this woman who was not just a lawyer, but a judge. And I thought, that's what I want to do. So much so that in my high school yearbook, I wrote that I wanted to go to law school and have a federal judicial appointment.
Now, you obviously have wonderful public speaking skills. That's why you were nominated for a Grammy Award. But that comes to you naturally as a result of some things that happened during your childhood.
Yes.
Your mother had you speak at the Miami-Dade County Youth Fair and Exposition. She signed you up to read a poem
She did.
by Margaret Walker called For My People. So why public speaking at that time, and why that particular poem?
Well, what I will say is it's very important as a part of my story to understand my parents. I talked about their backgrounds. I'm born in 1970, which is a very significant time in history for African Americans. It was within 3 or 4 years, or 4 or 5 years of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and the end of Jim Crow segregation. My parents had moved to Washington, D.C., like many Black people during that time, because this was the place where all of the legislative developments had occurred that essentially gave Black people their freedom, full participation in society that they had not had before. And my parents were really focused on training me, teaching me that I could do anything. They understood and had lived through a time in which their prospects were limited. And here I was being born in this new age of optimism and opportunity. And so my mother, again, both my parents are teachers, my mother was very focused on training me to believe that I could do anything. And this idea of putting me in public speaking competitions was part of her way of ensuring that I believed in myself, because she knew that I could do it. And so Margaret Walker's poem, For My People, was a poem that she had come into contact with in college. She said she loved this poem, For My People Everywhere, singing their slave songs repeatedly. And I memorized this poem, and I must have been 7 or 8 years old at the Miami-Dade County Youth Fair, standing on the stage, reciting this poem. And I did many, many competitions at the youth fair with my mother's blessing and encouragement.
And you won
And
several of
I
them.
won several of the, well, you know, it was kind of like a participation trophy, but I was good. I was good. I was good. And then you may be wanting to ask about, I then went on in high school, having been trained in public speaking by my mother. I joined our high school speech and debate team, and I was an orator. I was a speaker. And it was really one of the best things that I've ever done.
Well, during those competitions, you actually ended up at Harvard for a competition. So tell us about that and how that experience really colored your life after that.
Oh, so much. I mean, I'm in Miami, Florida, as I said. That's where I went to all of my schooling and graduated from high school. And our debate coach, Fran Berger, who was amazing, she was probably my most significant mentor of my entire career, really took an interest in me, trained me. We went to national tournaments. I went to a big public high school in Miami, Florida, and we had a few events that different activities that people participated in. If you weren't an athlete, you were in student government. So I was in student government. I was the president of my high school class, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. And you did something like debate. And our debate team was really good. We used to travel around Florida. We used to travel around the country. And one of the tournaments that we went to every year was the high school invitational at Harvard University in February. And I went maybe 2-3 years in a row. And I didn't know anything about Harvard. It was not on my radar screen at all, except I went to this tournament and I thought, this seems like a good school. People seem happy, So I applied in my senior year, just like you apply to other places, and was very excited to get in.
But Harvard was not easy for you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about some of those challenges you faced while you were at Harvard?
Well, it like so many people who go to a new and different environment, my freshman year, first semester, was very challenging. It was New England, it was cold, I was from Miami, Florida. I was not used to that at all. It was a completely different space. I had grown up with my entire extended family in Florida, and I just remember, I didn't mention before my actual birthday. My birthday is in September, and that fall, in September, my freshman year, I was turning 18, and it was my first birthday away from my family. And September, it's like 2 weeks into school, nobody knows you. And here I am on my 18th birthday. I haven't yet made friends. I'm away from home. It was really very challenging. And I talk about this in the book because I do want people who have similar life experiences to know that these kinds of things happen. And I was very homesick. But I pulled myself together.
Yeah, and obviously Harvard grew on you because then you went to law school there.
I did. I loved it, actually. Yeah.
While you were at Harvard, you also had the opportunity to meet someone very special,
Yes.
and that was your husband.
That was my husband. Go ahead.
You met him in college, and you married shortly after that.
I did.
And your paths continued to cross, and you eventually got married.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that relationship and how that progressed, because it's not like your husband is a stay-at-home husband.
No, not far from it. So I feel very blessed to have met my husband when I did. We met in college. He was a junior, and I was a sophomore. And for those of you who aren't familiar with my husband and my family situation, he is something that people call a Boston Brahmin. You heard this term? He has his family has been in Boston for generations. He can trace his family back to like Mayflower times. He is 6th or 7th generation Harvard. I come to Harvard, and I'm the 2nd generation in my family to go to any college, and it's really amazing that we met at all. But we meet in a class called The Changing Concept of Race in America. My husband was a sociology major, but he was also pre-med. So he knew from very young, just like I wanted to be a lawyer, he knew that he wanted to be a doctor. But in order to best serve the community, he wanted to also understand people. So he became a sociology major, and we're taking this class. And I recall very distinctly the first week or two, he would sit behind me and sort of, whisper things and tap me on the shoulder and, try to chat with me. And I thought, oh, this guy's kind of cute, but this is weird. And we had this class like Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And on Tuesday and Thursday, I had a government class because I was a government major. And I would see him in this class, and he wouldn't speak to me at all. So every other day, he was super friendly, and then I'd wave, and he would be like, what's going on? And it was the weirdest thing. So about a week or so of this, a week or two, I say to my roommates, this is happening. And they're like, this guy is crazy. Leave him alone. Don't talk to him anymore. And I say, no, I'm going to confront him on one of the friendly days. So on a friendly day, I say, hey, why don't you talk to me in our government class? And he says, I'm not taking a government class. And I said, yes, you are. I see you in my class. And he says, oh, you must be talking about my identical twin brother. Because he has an identical twin brother, which I did not know. So after we cleared that up, we got to be friends, and we dated for that year. And we actually ended up dating for 6.5 years before we got married. I went to law school, he went to medical school. And now we have been married 29 years. And you say he's very busy. Yes, he went on to become a surgeon. I obviously went into law practice. We have 2 wonderful daughters, but it was very challenging to balance our careers and our interests. The reason why I say I'm very fortunate to have met him when I did was because we met at a time and in a place where we both knew that our careers were very important to us, that the work was very important to us, and therefore that we would have to accommodate each other's interests and needs professionally, and that's what we've done.
Now, once you graduated from law school, you had a very varied career, and that included clerking for 2 judges and 1 Supreme Court justice. How did those experiences really influence what you eventually have done with your career?
Well, clerking is amazing. I highly recommend it for the students among you. It's a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to learn, especially if you're interested in litigation. And your judges become your mentors. So the opportunity to work in a chambers with a judge and have their backing when you're looking for other professional opportunities was really critical for me. I not only did the clerkships, I did I worked in various law firms, small law firms, big law firms. I worked in the public sector. I was a federal public defender. I worked at the Sentencing Commission. And all of those experiences I thought were really, really helpful when I decided to become a judge. One of my favorite quotes is from Oliver Wendell Holmes, who says that the life of the law is not logic, it is experience. And I actually believe that. So much of what we do as judges and as lawyers is making arguments or evaluating arguments related to real world facts. And having lived in the world and been exposed to a lot of different people in a lot of different circumstances, I think in a lot of ways it makes me a better judge. And so I've been very fortunate to have many, many workplaces and people that I've engaged with.
Now, you've also had some experience as a judge before you joined the Supreme Court. 2 questions. How did those experiences influence things that you're now doing on the court, number 1? And number 2, how did your experiences as a clerk influence how you treated your clerks?
Well, each one of my judicial service appointments has been very different. Those of you who know about the federal system, we have 3 levels. The trial court are operating alone. We are trying cases. We are developing records. We are focused on the facts and applying the law as it has been determined by the appellate courts. In the Court of Appeals, so I served as a district court judge in Washington, D.C. for the longest period of my judicial service, about 7.5 years. Then I was elevated to the Court of Appeals in the federal system in D.C. I was there only for a brief time, but I had actually clerked as a Court of Appeals judge, and I was a Court of Appeals clerk, and I was an appellate attorney in practice. I was an appellate defender, and so the appeals was really my area of expertise in the law. And the Court of Appeals, you were working with 2 other judges on a panel evaluating the law, which is very different substantively than the work of a district judge. And then now I'm on the Supreme Court. All of the current or former positions that I've had, I think, really help to inform the work that I do as a Supreme Court justice. Because what we are doing is essentially reviewing the work of our lower court colleagues. There are very few cases that come directly to the Supreme Court. They usually work their way up, and the arguments that are being made at the appellate level tend to be about alleged mistakes having been made below. And so having had the experience of a district court judge or a Court of Appeals judge, I think I can better evaluate, at least I like to think it's better, evaluate arguments about whether the lower courts have abused their discretion, for example, which is one of the standards that we often see. My clerkships, it's interesting. So I really do feel very fortunate. I clerked at all 3 levels of the court and of the federal system, and I've been a judge at all 3 levels of the federal system. So I have a lot of insight into it. All of my judges were wonderful. I still call them my judges, the judges for whom I clerked. And I hope that I am a good boss too. I know what it's like to work long hours as a law clerk and to be supporting your judge and to have to separate out your own views and try to put forward to the judge drafts of opinions and the like that are written in their style, that are reflective of their views. It's a very interesting activity that you have to do as a law clerk, and so I'm mindful of that when I'm working with my own clerks.
Now that you're on the Supreme Court, does it meet the expectations you had of what it would be like?
You know, so because I had clerked on the court before, I think I already had a sense of what it would be like, and that was good because it was such a whirlwind, the confirmation process. I don't know that I formed independent expectations of what the court would be like. I think it's a little, if I had to say something, I think I would say it's probably more formal, even behind the scenes, than I thought it would be. There are times when the justices meet only themselves. There's the conference, which occurs after oral arguments. The justices get together in a room and discuss the cases, and so no clerks are involved with that, and I didn't have any idea of what the conference was actually like, but it's very formal in a way that I think I didn't expect.
So now that you're on the court, what do you do for relaxation?
Oh,
Do you
I come to places like this and talk to you all. You know, I don't have a lot of time for relaxation, but I do try to keep myself hydrated. hydrated and fit. I take boxing lessons. So boxing is very good. It is a good workout in a lot of ways.
It's rid of a lot of frustration?
Exactly. It's a great outlet. And I walk the dog with my husband and, talk to my daughters on the phone.
Do you find that you have less time to spend with your husband and your daughters than you did as an appellate judge?
Yes. No, this is a very, very time-consuming job. There's a lot of work done around the clock in this position. Fortunately, we are in session formally from October to June, and so we do have the summer months, but we work even in the summer because the court is the final stop for many of the cases that are working their way through the system. A lot of emergencies come to us, and so we're working all the time, which is a little unfortunate in my view, but it's good. It's good.
How to become a law professor? You get summers off.
Yes, that would be wonderful. That would be wonderful.
I want to thank you for speaking with me, and I know that we had some audience questions that came in, and Provost Salkin will be joining us to ask you some additional questions.
Thank you.
You forgot to say a law professor at Touro Law Center. Thank you, Justice Jackson and Dean Langan, for such an engaging conversation. We've taken the liberty to get a few questions from the audience prior to our discussion that I'd like to ask you now on everybody's behalf.
Sure.
As a student who is interested in pursuing a path to become a judge upon graduation, what specific steps or types of experience would you recommend law students prioritize early in their legal career to work towards the goal of being a judge? And how do I balance the right foundation now while still focusing on becoming an excellent lawyer first?
Oh, well, the first step is to become an excellent lawyer. So those two things go hand in hand. The people who do go on to careers as judges usually do have work experience as a lawyer in some area. And as from my personal experience, I think getting to work in different environments is very helpful. If you have the opportunity in your career to not only work for, say, a law firm, but also getting some public service, it's a very helpful thing to have worked in the DA's office or the U.S. Attorney's office, the public defender's office. In those kinds of environments, if anything, you get a lot of actual hands-on case experience because many offices in the public sector really need people. They have a big volume of cases, and when they bring on young lawyers, they give you a lot of experience early on. And so you just want to get as much litigation experience as possible if you are thinking about being a judge. And I would say the other thing you want to work on your skills for sure when you are in law school and when you're practicing. Writing is a very important skill for a judge. Comfort with public speaking, very important. But you also want to network and make connections with people, because the people who go on to be judges really get those opportunities in part because they have made the kind of connections and community. They have a community around them who are supporting them through the judicial process. You're going to need people. And so I would suggest trying to make those kinds of connections.
Great advice. As the first former federal public defender to serve on the United States Supreme Court, how do you believe that experience has shaped your approach to decision-making on the bench?
You know, I don't know that it shaped my approach to decision-making as much as my process, primarily when I was a district court judge. One of the things that district court judges have to do is really interface directly with the people whose cases are coming before you. The appellate judges don't actually talk to or interact with the people, but district court judges do. We have to, for example, sentence people, and that is a really difficult task. And I think my experience as a federal public defender helped me with respect to my practices as a judge in something like sentencing. When I was a defender, I was, as I mentioned earlier, an appellate defender. And what that meant was that all of my clients had been convicted, and my job was to review their materials and the trial transcripts and try to come up with or determine whether there were any legal issues that I could bring to the appeals court. And one of the things that I discovered very early on was how few of my clients really had understood what had happened to them in their trial processes. That I would call them in jail and I would say, you know, I'm looking at your trial transcript, can you talk to me about what happened? And they had no idea. And I think I took that lesson when I became a trial judge, when I was trying people and sentencing them. I was very focused on communicating with them, on showing people respect in my courtroom, because what I wanted was for them to accept the punishment that I was giving, even if they disagreed, obviously. They understood what the process was, they felt respected through it, and in my view, they could then go and actually be rehabilitated rather than feeling like they were slighted or not paid attention to in the process. And so it was the idea of having interacted with people who had gone through the system and felt that it had not treated them properly that I think really helped me as a judge when I had to do those kinds of things.
So you've spoken so highly of your clerkship experiences, and as a student hoping to clerk after graduation, what advice would you give about being successful in a clerkship and knowing whether it's the right fit for you personally? And how can we apply that wisdom when pursuing clerkship opportunities of our own?
Well, I encourage you, if you're thinking about being a litigator, to try to get a clerkship. I think it is one of the most significant training opportunities for young lawyers because you get a sense, a really good sense of how judges think. And if you think about what it is that litigators do for a living, we formally, me, litigators persuade judges to rule in favor of their clients. That's what your job is. And so having worked with a judge, you start to get a good sense of what is a persuasive argument. You read hundreds of briefs and you start to understand how an argument is constructed and written. And all of those things become extremely beneficial to you as a practicing lawyer. I would say apply broadly. There are wonderful judges at all levels, in all places. Sometimes people focus on the most popular places, New York, DC, but there are fabulous judges all over the country. So it's a year, maybe two, of your young life, and you could be anywhere, and you should cast a wide net if you're looking for a clerkship. The state level, wonderful judges, you can clerk at the state level. And I just highly, highly recommend it because I think it's a wonderful opportunity.
Could you share what it means to you personally and professionally to serve as the first Black woman on the United States Supreme Court?
Oh, it's an extraordinary honor. You know, I talked earlier about Judge Motley and how much she meant to me as a middle school student. I think she means even more to me now. The reason why I say that is because not only was she the first Black woman judge in the federal system, she was the first Black woman to argue a case in the Supreme Court of the United States. She argued something like 10 cases and she won 9 of them. She was extraordinary, but she never had the chance to serve on the Supreme Court because of the times in which she lived. And so I feel so fortunate that I am able to be in this position, to do this kind of work, to hopefully be someone who can inspire people coming behind me to aspire to do something like the Supreme Court. It's a wonderful privilege to be doing this work.
Let's go. One last question. Through interactions with attorneys and judges, I've learned that certain cases stay with them throughout their careers. Is there a case you've worked on or presided over that you'll never forget or that has fundamentally shaped how you approach the law, either personally or professionally?
Wow. Well, there are so many cases that I've had the privilege to preside over in my capacity as a judge in the District of Columbia. Many of the cases that go on to a place like the Supreme Court start in our jurisdiction because the District of Columbia is the seat of the federal government, and people who are challenging federal authority typically come to the District of Columbia. So I have had so many cases, but what's interesting, I think, in response to your question, is that one of the cases that most impacted me personally was a case that was not arising out of government power, federal government power in this way. It was a case that I ended up doing a trial related to. It was an inmate in the District of Columbia who brought an ADA lawsuit against the prison in the District of Columbia. And the case was called Pierce versus the District of Columbia. Mr. Pierce was deaf at birth, and he had a domestic dispute that caused him to be arrested and incarcerated for a period of months. And when he arrived at the DC jail, they did nothing to assess his disability or to accommodate him, even though he repeatedly asked for a sign language interpreter. American Sign Language was his language. He didn't read lips. He didn't know how to communicate without it. And the jail did not provide him with any kind of accommodation. He was there for a few months. He ended up in solitary confinement because he didn't understand what was going on. They put him in anger management classes, and he didn't understand what was going on. He ended up having a huge medical complication because he couldn't communicate with the doctors to explain the medications that he needed because they didn't provide him with accommodation. And I was so certain that what this jail had done was an ADA violation that I actually granted summary judgment in favor of the plaintiff, which is very rare. And we had a trial on damages. And what was interesting about the case and what was so memorable for me was we are in trial, and somehow one of the jail officials is on the stand. And the lawyer asks, ma'am, when a person who has a hearing disability comes to jail, what do you do to evaluate them? And she answered, do you mean now or back when Mr. Pierce was first admitted? I perked up. And he said, why don't you answer both? And she said, oh, when Mr. Pierce came through, we didn't do anything. But now, after this case, we hire a virtual interpreter who is available to us on call so that when people with disabilities, this kind of disability come in, we have the ability to communicate with them. And I thought, yeah, the law matters. It matters.
Making a difference. Thank you once again, Justice Jackson, for being this year's Bruce K. Gould Book Award recipient. We're truly honored to have you with us today. Could we please have a round of applause for Justice Jackson as she departs? If you could please remain at your seats. Please remain in your seats. We have some closing remarks. On behalf of Touro Law Center, I'd like to say thank you to Bruce Gould for your commitment to this program and the dedication to the Gould Book Award. You bring such remarkable awardees to our school. Also want to acknowledge my predecessor, former Dean Larry Rafel, who's here with us today as well. You know, Touro Law students are truly unique and highly driven in their pursuit of justice. And we are grateful that we can share such an important figure in our legal community with our students, faculty, and alumni. I'm hopeful that all of you have been able to purchase your signed copy of Justice Jackson's memoir. If not, feel free to visit some of our staff who are outside the auditorium. As a little birdie told me, we have a few extra copies of the books available for sale. I want to thank everybody for joining us here tonight.